everybody. That's good. The microphone working? I think everybody can hear you. Yeah, can they? Well, just
Scott.
Yeah.
Stuff.
He's ready.
Welcome everybody.
There you are.
Yeah.
Nice, see?
I don't think the man needs an introduction. He just brought his own. And if you don't know who he is, you don't live in Melbourne. And this is afternoon with Father Bob. Open for any questions you have for him. I don't think any questions are off limits. So as long as you keep it clean. And I'd like to introduce Father Bob Maguire. Thank you.
He's the, what do you mean keep it clean? I'm 79, I'm 80 in
14th of September.
14th of September, when the Scots will vote to either stay with the United Kingdom or leave.
Wow.
Do you know that?
No. Leave.
See? So can you imagine, see what they'll have to do? They'll have to change the flag, won't they? The Union Jack. They'll have to take a bit out of it. And they'll have to do all kinds of things.
Is that a good thing?
They'll have to get their ships out of Scottish ports, because we've got their ships. See, and they'll be nervous about, hey, what am I talking about Scotland for? But anyway, because we're all, aren't we, migrants, aren't we?
Yes.
1923, my lot. 1923 they came. Station Pier. Anybody, your parents would have come to stay. No, you wouldn't, because if you come recently, you come by aeroplane, didn't you? They all used to come. How long did it take from England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales to get to Australia in the old days? It was a fair while. Wasn't it? Terrible long time. But, yeah, that's why I'm here, because I like, although we had a fight in the car because he's multicultural. Fight between the, what do you call it, multicultural, and what's the other thing we used to fight about in the early days after the White Australia policy? Integration, wasn't it? Integration and assimilation.
Integration versus assimilation.
Yeah, assimilation. And 60 years later, or however, I don't know, when did the White Australia policy allegedly disappear? It was in my time. After WW2 probably.
It lingered on for quite a while. Like my family came here in the early 70s and we felt the effects of that still.
What are you, communists or something?
Could be.
They've taken over already. There's the trouble, you promote people and they take over, isn't it? No, but keep at it, because it's fascinating, because I come from Albert Park now, where I've got this a shop, and down the road we've got another, because they threw me out 2012, I think February 12, which is 2.5 years ago, and they only threw me out because they didn't like me, like they're going to do to Mr. Shaw. In the Victorian Parliament, see? Well, you see, but he hasn't done much. He's only misused the car and he's misused the credit card, hasn't he? But he hasn't blown up the bloody Parliament House. Yeah, the Aussies are funny because they get, depending on who's running the media unit, they give you the impression that Geoffrey Shaw was worse than some of the other comrades who are in suits and doing far worse things probably behind the scenes, but they've convinced the Victorians that poor old Geoffrey, because I think they're also nervous because Geoffrey is born again, isn't he? I think he's a born again Christian. Yeah, so they're a bit nervous about that. And also, of course, because he's anti-abortion. Yeah, they don't want to let that rabbit out of the hat, because all hell will break loose, you know. I mean, even the Catholics don't talk about it anymore, because you'd end up in an extraordinary political brawl, you see. And even though politics is the art of the possible, you still have certain things that you can, if you avoid, you can avoid them, dividing the community. So it's an interesting thing, and I got thrown out for the same kind of reason, not for abortion, thank God, for not complying and conforming with the, the fashion. Not the doctrine, not the morals, but just the fashion. Because the Roman Church had gone through a counter-revolutionary phase after about the 80s, 90s, when we'd gone onto the streets, I think, in the 1960s. Because they told us, get out in the streets, don't hang around the church. Take your collar off your fool, you frighten the natives. So we did all that, we did as we were told. I'm walking around, you know what I mean? This is not unusual, this is, I'm as badly dressed now as I was in 1960. You see? Because that's the way the Aussies dressed. You know? Badly. And you can always tell the difference between the upper class and the ordinary Aussie, because the upper class used to wear ties and suits. Whereas the others used to, you know, bogans. So, 1960s Roman Church globally became a bit, let's flatten the model. Because we had World War II, and World War II, which almost proved, as far as the churches were concerned, that God didn't exist. So, because how could God exist if he killed how many in World War I? Millions. And as far as we know in World War II, if you listen to the stories about the invasion of Normandy, which is only how long ago, 70 is it, or 60? 70. I mean, they were killing more on the way onto the beach than they did probably afterwards. Because the soldiers got off in 60 feet of water, wasn't it, or 30 feet? Off you go, boys, and save Europe. Goodbye, and they saluted and they jumped over the side and they fell in 30 bloody feet of water, fully dressed, boots, hats, guns, but they saluted on the way down. You know what I mean? And then by the time they got on there, they reckon they killed about, 20,000 of the local residents, you know, to save Europe. And then 70 years later, I mean, we're still fighting in Ukraine, and I mean, what changes? So the Roman Church got mixed up in all that and said, oh God, you know, we're not doing much good for humanity. We're doing all right for ourselves because we've got plenty of churches apart from the ones that got blown up in WW2, and we've still got, you know, we're global. But then somebody popped up and said, let's get flat the bottle, and Vatican II it was called. Because Safran always rolls his eyes when I mention Vatican. Oh God, he's going to mention Vatican II again, you know. Well, it was the turning point as far as we were concerned that just sent us onto the streets, you see, and said the outsiders are more important than the insiders. Now imagine any religion starting to preach that, you know. The outsiders are more important than the insiders. You see? Because it sounds too dangerous, socially. But we took it seriously, see. So you ended up with parishes feeding the poor, even though they weren't Roman Catholics. Imagine that. So we didn't ask them for a ticket or a rosary bead or something before you get in. We fed everybody, and some of us were like us, poor old South Melbourne, and I went into the dark down to St Kilda. He was there, he's in the pictures. In the dark, see? The street kids. No, there's no street kids, said the police. We never heard of street kids. Oh, we said, we just met them. No, there's none, we haven't got any reports. And the State Department of whatever it was called in those days, what was it called? Social welfare or something? No, there's no street kids. No, I said, we just met them down the street. No, our officers haven't heard. Oh, fair enough. So after a while, I mean, the police said, listen, you prove they're there, we'll do something. So we proved they were there. And the coppers then decided, well, they would join join us, trying to help street kids, because street kids were like they're all banging on now about, aren't they? Sex slaves around the world, aren't they? That's the latest that we should be concerned about, is all the people that are being trafficked. Well, we were doing it already in the 1970s. Still now we're doing it. You see, but we don't, the Aussies don't like talking about those things, because we presumed that we had grown out of it or something. So that's how we started. See, but the church was fitted in easily with those things, because you could run around and say, Jesus said that you've got to look after the poor. So all the people in Catholic churches would bow their head and make the sign of the cross. And then they wouldn't go and help the poor, but I mean, at least they'd say their prayers. You see? They'd say, oh God, please help the poor. See? Whereas a few, that's all you're going to get, a few, would in fact join in. So we started a thing called Open Family Foundation, simply because that's what the kid on the street said he was looking, he needed. What do you want, son? I want a family. You got a family? No, they threw me out. So we said, oh, well, the open family will be the family you have when nobody else will have you. So we started that, and then that segued into a thing called Emerald Hill Mission, which meant we can't be dealing with people in South Melbourne, Middle Park, Port Melbourne as though they were street people, because they still had houses to go to, you see. The street kids didn't have houses. So you end up with a thing that had the same philosophy, but in fact it fed people from food vans, and we fed people from the parish house, and we did all that kind of stuff. But it was for people who went back to the housing ministry, and they had a place to, if they wanted to, they could go home to it. And then eventually, after a while, we decided to start something that couldn't be, what? Because both of those organisations became, what do you call it, niche charities. Niche, meaning that they wanted to be good looking and respectable, and they had overheads. You paid your staff more than you paid the poor. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So I decided we better have another one that doesn't do any of that. None of these things have life expectancy of only about maybe 20 years before they start going, what do you call it, bourgeois, upwardly socially mobile, which all of them have done now. There's a warning out now, a weather warning amongst the charities, that in fact sooner or later there might be only a few mega charities, you see, engaged in the war for the funds. See what I mean? Because they keep telling us, and Mr. Hockey's telling us too, there's a limit to the size of the pie. See, and I'm saying, we'll go and bake another bloody pie. See? Well, the other one I'm waiting for him to try is there are only 9 hats and 10 heads. So I think what he'll do is chop that head off. So I think he'll do so that the hats fit the number of heads. Whereas I'm saying, darling, why don't you go and get another hat? See, but it's all too much apparently for the economic theory of the time, isn't it? See? Don't spend because why? Because we're going to go broke. You know, they just sold a house opposite my place in Albert Park for 2.2 million. It's only that big. So it's almost made out of Lego. See? And the boy down the street in Brighton, God love him, down to his last dollar, see, he only sold his for 16 million. Poor darlings, you know, there's a nice man and a woman and probably even a baby might be there. And a dog. $16 million, you know. And there's all the launches in the world parked down near me, down on the river, on the way out the Maribyrnong River. How many launches are down there? They never go out. Because you've got them as, what? Signs of upward social mobility. So we started the Father Bob Maguire Foundation, and more or less it's been going since about 2003. So, you know, it's 9 years, plus 2.5 years of having to regroup, which we have now done, thank God. So we've got a place where we can park our three food vans, And we've got a place where we can store the clothes, thank you, that you're going to donate this afternoon, thank you. The bloke told me in the street this morning, we have a chalet up at Falls Creek. Not doing too good. No snow. So he's got tunas to give away. So he said, well, deliver them to my place. Because then somebody might be able to wrap themselves up in a doona under the Baltic Bridge. Huh? Or in the Preston Football Club's, what do you call it, grandstand. Isn't it?
Or in docklands under the...
Or in docklands under the what?
Under the walkways.
Under the walkways. See what I mean? Because that's, I suppose that's one of the practical things that we want to do today, and that is to advise you on what you can do practically. See, because I can keep talking all bloody afternoon until you call the police. For God's sake, take him away, because he hasn't shut up for the last 3 hours. See what I mean? But you see, we don't want to go without helping you with a few practical hints as to what you can do. See? Have we upset you or anything?
No, I've got to get back.
Oh, have we talked that long, have I?
Sorry,
Have we talked that long or what?
No.
Have we?
No.
Then we'll turn class off. Someone was a fire or something in there. So the practical things of which there is, that's what he's here for, because I've tried to insist that the first thing you have to do if you want to change the world is to find out what the world's like. Don't jump to conclusions. See what I mean? Because it's not politics. We don't create a world of our own and then argue from there. No. It's got to be realistic and say, have we got that on the thing or not?
What?
On the thing, on the stick. Hello? Look, they're all going,
Sorry, got to go back to class.
isn't it? How long are we supposed to be here? 5 minutes. Isn't it? That's what the nature of the beast is, isn't it? Yeah. It's like church, they all walk in and out. Yeah. Because they know where the collection is. So, what do you got? Anything on the stick? I want to see that thing that says demographics. Because before you can do much, you've got to know your environment. Because this is an environmentally friendly science. See? We usually talk from the heart about how we should be doing this and the other thing. But the fact of the matter is you've got to be scientific, I believe, in finding out exactly what is the demographic that needs to be attended to, see? And unfortunately, one bloke's been already trying, what are they, stats or what?
Demographics?
Yes. Because a mob did in fact do research on the whole of Victoria and New South Wales, and they ended up with all kinds of, not performance indicators, what do you call those things? What are those things called in there? In that book?
In this book?
Yes. Gracias. They have things that we need to know. For example, components, child abuse, people on disability or sickness benefits, school leavers, low income, low skills, unemployed, year 12 incomplete, imprisonment, psychiatric admissions, unemployment, mortality ratio, all those indicators that need to, otherwise we don't know who we're trying to help and what we should be doing to help them. See what I mean? Now this should fit into your business of being students. Correlations between antecedent and outcome variables for different degrees of social cohesion, for God's sake. Huh? Unemployment / low birth weight. Huh? What's that got to do with it? Of course it's got things to do with it. They're indicators. Early school leaving, year 12 incomplete, as related to low birth weight, unemployment and imprisonment, early school, all that kind of stuff. Low work skills, imprisonment, see those indicators as to how you can end up with maybe even a whole suburb or part of a suburb that in fact is at the tipping point, you see? And what can you do scientifically? I mean, you can do it prayerfully in a mosque or a temple or a synagogue or a church or an ashram, you can get in there together and huddle and pray to God that somebody would solve the problem. But on the other hand, you see, you can get into a huddle and you can find out scientifically what you can do to relieve the pain that people are going through because of these social conditions in which they're living. Huh? And unfortunately, we're living in a day and age in Australia, if not around the world, where unfortunately the 1%ers are starting to treat the 99% as though the 99% are to blame for poverty. See? Now that's new to me. In my lifetime, I thought we'd got out of that. But it looks as though we're slipping back into it. Because you've got to have somebody to blame. And the ones that are easiest to blame are those who have showed the signs of poverty. You see? And unfortunately, you see certain postcodes may well be labelled with the stamp of being not the kind of place where you can get on in the world, isn't it? And once that happens, you see, you get what they call community collapse disorder. See? Because it becomes, what do you call it? Infectious? It's not infectious. The other thing. Contagious? Whatever it is. You can catch it. You see? And you see, the more they bang on in Parliament about the waste of funds on people going to the university, so that in fact you've got to pay to go to the university, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that, and you get a sinking feeling in your belly. There's something wrong with this. It's the same with the famous Battle of Eureka that the migrants should learn about. Eureka. Eureka wasn't all about money. Eureka was about fairness. This is unfair. Huh? Tiananmen Square, yes? About fairness. Huh? Egypt. Fairness. So that's what we're on about, and it's very difficult in Australia to be able to run a campaign about fairness because the media, probably owned by Mr. Murdoch, is it? Mr. Murdoch?
Yeah.
The media will spin it the other way and say, no, this is not about fairness, this is about people who are too bloody lazy to get out of their own way, you see? So it's perception, because we live in a culture of perception. What do we look like? What do we sound like? What do we smell like? You see, what do we walk like? What do we dress like? See, the culture of perception is not very helpful when it comes to solving social problems. Because as you know, some of the worst dressed people are the best social workers in the world. Huh? What more? Do you want to say anything? No, that's all right. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, just some questions we've got from our class.
What's it about?
Well, I'll start from the top. Yep. If Australia has such a good social safety net,
Yes.
which it does, why is there still so many homeless people?
Because the safety net's been shifted, hasn't it?
Is that the main reason, or is it?
Well, I would have thought so, but I mean, the safety net was installed in my time when I went to South Melbourne, and I think I went to South Melbourne at a strange time. It was 72, 69. The developers had pulled all the little houses down and built high-rise, and they installed the housing ministry. And so the safety net, I remember the dole was installed. You can answer the question.
Well, the safety net, I don't think it works. I don't think it works all across the board. You know, we've got housing shortage, so you've got overcrowded places, and there's other definitions of homelessness where people staying on other people's couches and in garages and all that kind of thing. I mean, if we don't have enough housing, how are we going to house people? So there's a massive hole in the safety net there. What else did you want to ask about the safety net?
Well, that boy there too, look.
Yeah, is there any other questions? Yeah.
When it's been about thousands of people with homeless, which people spend about thousands of people, cost millions of dollars to spend on housing because see, homeless ends up spending, you have to pay, you're likely paying out in December, have got a hat and collect some money. You are homeless and then you have to spend, how much you spend on? If you don't like people to spend, because people like homeless, like earlier this year we killed Wayne something, a 42-year-old guy, he died, he punched the guy and he killed the guy and he passed away with a very bad injury. They said we need to end homeless by 2018.
I don't understand your question.
Yeah, 2018, for example, in 2018, there will be end of homeless in the next 4 years' time.
If what?
If the homeless ends in 2018, then they have to help by the time.
Help the man, help the man. What's he saying?
What question? What are you trying to ask?
It's trying to survive. It said if people
Who
live
said?
homeless, if people live homeless badly, because if people are sleeping on the street like in the
Yes.
city, and also we wanted to end the homeless by 2018. We want to end the homeless people by 2018. Otherwise, the people had a home by 2018, but by the time in 2018, he is the goodbye homeless, hello people, is goodbye off the street, hello in the street at home.
Yeah, but to achieve that, you have to also understand there's a lot of people now who are homeless who have mental health issues.
Oh, okay.
Because a lot of the funding was just being cut all the time. So now we're seeing a lot of people with mental health issues out on the streets,
Oh, okay.
and they can't manage to find themselves a home.
Oh, okay.
So
And also
So-
most of
so-
the people in your prisons
Oh,
are mental health cases rather than criminal cases.
really?
Yeah, that's the easiest way for your society to deal with problem cases, is to warehouse them. We will build a bigger prison.
and it's cheaper than
Sorry?
mental health professionals to work with them.
It's easy just to put them.
Just put them in jail.
Put them away.
That's about 40 to 50 grand a year. Whereas if you're paying mental health professionals and housing them and all that, it's a lot more.
That man was...
Yes, I was trying to work it out. I still haven't worked out what this reunion today is all about. I mean, we talk about the homeless people. Do we have any homeless people in this room today? You put your hands up.
They might
If we
like
haven't,
to.
we are talking.
No, you don't know whether they are or not. They're not going to answer that question by putting their hands up. They're embarrassed.
Okay.
That's what I said to the man on the way in. How many students here
Keep your hands
came
down.
from an industrial bin? See? Because even if I went to Melbourne Grammar School, I would still be quite convinced that there are people in the audience who would be as badly off as the kids that I know, or young people I know in South Melbourne, Port Melbourne or Preston or wherever.
That's
And you also have to define the definition of homeless as well. You know, like I said before, there could be people sleeping on somebody's couch. And okay, they've got a roof over their head, they've got somewhere to sleep, but it doesn't necessarily mean
In that
they've got a
case,
home.
they should be here today and listen, so we can improve it and find out what their needs are. This is question number one. Question number two is what is it, Bob, Father Bob, has anything to do with the politics? I mean, this is the religion is one
This is Australian, mate.
organization, and politics it's a different.
No. It used to be, when you were young, it was. Religion and politics. But see, in Australia, you see, you're supposed to be free from religion and free, what's the word? Freedom of religion and freedom from religion. But you see, I'm saying, and this is what I'm saying, Vatican II, thank God, came in time for me. It says the Roman Catholic Church cannot absent itself from the marketplace. You see? Party politics is the problem. So you end up with a fascist party that happens to be mainly Roman Catholics, whether it's in Spain or whether it's in Latin American countries or Italy or Malta or wherever it is. That was the difficulty. Whereas the churches, in fact, shouldn't be separated along, what do you call it, denominational financial lines. We should all be in this together, like we were saying to you or somebody here before, whether this institute should in fact have an interfaith prayer room where everybody's got access to it. See, that's the Australian way. It's all in or none. You see? Whereas the European model was you separated into your denominations. So if we come from Macedonia, some of us are Orthodox, and if we come from Macedonia, some of us are Slavs, aren't we? Yes? See, it's divisive. Religion should not be allowed to be divisive because it's almost of its nature. According to this film, if any of you are going to stay for this film, we give a thumbnail sketch of the history of the churches and how they in fact end up in certain discernible shapes because of politics. You see?
Going back to like your first question was, I think your point was that there aren't homeless people here, so how can we speak to them and ask them what they need? Is that what you were saying? Well, the obvious thing is to go out there, either make an organisation or go with an organisation and find out, or speak to organisations that deal with homeless people if you don't have that amount of time to put
We do
into
have
it.
a Prime Minister in this country, and
We have what?
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, yeah.
in this country, and he does
And you're going to put your faith in the
represent
Prime
the
Minister.
order from those people and responsible for everybody.
You think Tony Abbott's
That's-
going to take the time out to find out what homeless people, what situation they're in, what they think, and do something about it?
Tony Abbott or to be anybody else, they should have it's their job, their responsibility to ensure that this country
That's right, they
is
should.
not in.
They should.
in-
But the question is whether they do or not.
well,
That man.
Yeah, so, well, just back to what you're saying about religion and politics. You're saying religion and politics shouldn't work together. They should,
Seamus, could you go up and say
Well, they
the
can
question
work
up
together.
there?
He's talking about religion and politics working together. See, but I'm not. Well, I'm talking probably from institutional politics, institutional religion. You see, whereas in fact I don't. If you can get a Catholic or a Jew or a Muslim or a Buddhist or whoever to work, if they can only work together, well then they will present to Australia a very impressive working model of the only way to solve our social problems. It's either going to be all in or none, because as he says, you see, you're going to end up getting terrified if a religious group goes on the streets and says we've come to save the poor. You'll be terrified that they're going to convert the poor into the members of their own religion. See?
yeah,
And they can't wait, the poor can't wait any longer. See, for people to sort out ideological differences. That's why my foundation is a strange thing, because it's made up of people from all kinds of backgrounds. See, I'm a Roman Catholic priest, I'm not going to apologise for that even in the prevailing climate. But the fact of the matter is my foundation is interfaith, including the atheist. You see what I mean? Is somebody waving?
Yeah, it's,
The only way you could probably eradicate poverty, you got to start from the top down, and get religion out of it. Get religion out of it by saying take the good things, and knowing what good things are. Take the religion completely out of it.
Yeah, but religion, as he will say, see, religion is the wisdom of the ages says, and the founders of the religions all say that in fact the way to heaven is to look after the poor. See? Now I don't know how you're going to get that message across. See, whether it's Muslims or whether it's Confucius or whether it's Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, they all say, and including himself, the prophet, you've got to look after the poor first, and then you'll find your way through that into whatever heaven is.
I think, my opinion, this is only in my opinion.
Yes.
Investing money in homeless people.
Yes,
And they take it for granted, and they're taking the money
Yes.
and they're using it for other use.
yes,
That's one. Then, instead of to spend the money like that,
yes,
to educate, to make a change
Yes.
in their mentality, get them to thinking
Yes.
differently, wouldn't be a better, a wise way
of course
to
it
do
would, of course it would.
That's what we're all trying to do. Make sure they have the right environment to study in first. Right? If you've got a house where people are just crashing and you've got 10 people staying there, and if somebody's trying to learn something, they can't. This is too much.
The environment.
Yeah. So they need the environment first. So they need a home first, and then of course skills and education, because what you want ultimately is to have those people become independent.
But we'd also have, I'm old.
So you still have
We
to spend
need
money.
pit stops, we need places where people who want to get on in the world, but who can't because of a domestic environment or a regional environment, they should have a place where they can go and do work, do recreation, even live, if they have to. But you see, that's a huge investment, and I don't know what the Aussies are up to it.
My father taught me in order to learn the lessons,
Yeah.
I had to sacrifice. I'm sure you agree.
Yeah, well, that's what he was saying in
Without
the
any
car.
sacrifice,
Yeah, I know,
you
but
will
that's...
not achieve any success in life.
I know, it's a pious thought, but I'm saying these have reminded me in the car over here that a lot of kids, students, haven't got fathers who are telling them nice things like that. Or they might be telling them nice things, but they're not showing them nice things. See what I mean? See, there's as much loneliness amongst the rich parents and their children as there is amongst... In fact, there's probably more loneliness amongst the rich people than there is amongst the poor people.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean?
What?
Can you elaborate more in what way?
Well, I'm only know from experience around the affluent suburbs and by going to private schools that there are as many people suffering, these days, deficiencies in, what's the word they use these days? Well-being. Well-being, that's the go now. And then the rich are as sad and as lonely and as leading as meaningless lives, much more than, say, people who are living in the housing ministry, who have learned to make do with less.
And have more of a community.
See?
You've got more of a community, so there's...
More
Yeah.
together?
If they're allowed to, but you see, this is what worried me over 60 years, is the bloody drug traffickers. Because once they've infested the housing ministry, you see, we can't compete with them. We haven't got the assets to be able to, or the resources to be able to compete. So how many kids are being corrupted at an early age, so they never get to the stage of being able to study or end up here at the institute.
And then once the problem's gone on for a while, like I was speaking to some volunteers last week saying, well, how do you compete with that? Like, you know, this guy's offering the kid can make $200, $300, $400 a day, and do this and have this bling, blah blah, be the king of his mates, blah blah. And then we're going to say, well, if you come with us, we'll help you find a place. You can go to school. We'll help you get tutors, mentors, whatever. It's going to take about 5 or 6 years, and then you might get 40 grand a year. You know, that's... So how do you compete with
The
that?
same with
That's-
you lot,
that's a
isn't
big
it?
problem.
After you've done all your studies, isn't it? See, you'd be lucky if you're working in Macca's. Isn't it? You know what I mean? It's come the whole cycle. You
Cab
know?
drivers with PhDs.
See, when they came home from WW2, the government gave the sign. That's why they were delighted with the war. Because the poor went to the war, but when they came back, the poor ended up with free education. They ended up with housing, what do you call it, the war service homes. See, and they ended up with all kinds of medical services. See, that got the poor up, the same with the Yanks. The Yanks love joining the armed services because they're given a package that they could never get in Civvy Street. See? Now who's offering you a package to get through the next 20 years? Isn't it? Now that's when you say trickle, did you say trickle down? I'm more interested in trickle up. See? without violence, somehow trickle up. That's why you're in an institute, because you've got time to think, isn't it?
Yeah, but
What?
you say, I know, trickle up, that's only solving the problem for a short while. But what I'm trying to say, if we go from the top, we should go from the top
Yeah.
down, that's how we can.
We'll do both.
You can do both. You have to do both.
You have to do
There's no
both.
other way to do it.
See?
Somebody's
And
got
you'll
to
have to
convince
do it
those
too.
people in Parliament.
You'll have to do it quickly too, because in
The
fact,
whole
it's-
system's changed. The house prices are ridiculous. We don't make, Australia doesn't make anything anymore. Well, no car, nothing to manufacture, all from overseas.
yes.
What future has Australia got at the end of the day?
Well, Australia's got the future that you
Yeah,
are prepared to design for it.
that's right. But
See?
it's limited.
Well, it's only limited by your imagination. Huh?
Yeah.
We're still free.
Plenty of resources, still lots of arable land, lots of.
And it's free. The freedom we have here, that nobody else in the universe has got, isn't it? See, but it carries with it a disease, this freedom. And the disease is that you are free to make fools of yourselves, collectively and individually. So it remains a terrible temptation. It's called, what's it, any Greeks? Hubris. Hubris. It's the temptation that they had, the gods. You see? And that fellow who flew to the sun and his wings burnt. What's his name?
Icarus.
Icarus. See? Hubris. That brings you down even when you're at your most powerful and most, brilliant. See? Just one step too far. And the Aussies are on the verge of taking that step. See? Or they can turn themselves into what the founding fathers and mothers decided we would be, whereas the people of Australia decided to form a commonwealth. See? They should go back to the Constitution and see that in line 1, the Aussies decided to form a commonwealth. Well, let the bloody thing be a commonwealth. See, but it's not. It's going to be wealth for the few. And you don't have to be a commo to see that. Is it time to go? Oh no, you've got more.
Yeah, a few more questions. Yeah,
We're going to get thrown out here.
do you think that the gap between the rich and the poor is widening?
Yes, gap between rich and poor widening. The answer, as far as I'm concerned, is yes. And even the blokes at the top, I think, would admit that. But then you'd come into the somebody wants to blame somebody. See? Got to have to blame. Who's to blame because the gap is widening? Of course the gap's widening. The gap will widen. Did you see the film Elysium? Huh? The rich all go and live in a thing up there.
We all go in the same spot.
Isn't it?
But the problem with the people in this country, we're all aware, we had it 2 years ago now. We need to get back on the track
Yeah.
and ensure it that instead of you pointing the finger to other people,
Yeah.
because when we do that, one
Yeah.
finger goes over there, 3 they come back to us.
Yes.
It is our fault why we are homeless,
Yes.
why we don't have, why we
Yes.
don't achieve
All
the
right.
things we want in life.
I know. This is the problem with
It's
the old.
our fault. It's not the government fault. It's not the religion fault. It's not. It's our fault because
Yes.
we haven't learned to know how to do
There's
it.
something wrong with that argument because that's the argument of the older migrant.
There you are. The migrants that come to this country, they've been told that this is a land of opportunity. They come here and they run their sleeves and they work hard in life. The people in this country, they've been born here,
Yes.
they take it for granted,
Yes.
they don't do nothing
Righto.
because they don't know what opportunity is.
Exactly.
They haven't been told
Yeah.
what they can
Yeah,
do
but
and what
there's-
they can't
You
do.
no.
can't blame the people, the
That lady
public.
wants to say, that man wants to say something.
Can I just ask you, Father, what is the most experience you've had with, what age people have you helped most with?
Oh, it's, well, we
Which
started-
group, which age group have you helped most?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know if I helped anybody, but I mean, I'm saying the ones we worked with have been over the last 50 years. We started off when they were 11, 12. You you see, and we've worked with them, and we've almost client-tracked them to the natural outcome of their progress, which is sad because 40 of them died in the 80s, the age of 20.
What are the least people have you helped? Have you not
Least,
the
least.
least, you know, in a category like the young or the middle age?
No, all of them.
Yeah.
Because I was in a parish for 38 years.
Okay.
So you end up getting mixed up with all kinds of age groups, you see. Because your parish has decided to be a commonwealth, well then everybody, doesn't matter whether they're Roman Catholics or whoever they are, use the place as a pit stop. So you've got funerals, you've got weddings, you've got all kinds of things that you can, you make the facility open to everybody. You see what I mean? So you then become a pit stop rather than a comfort station. See? And that's what we need, is more pit stops. But the elderly too, because I'm old.
You don't look that old.
Well, I'm old as the bloody hills. But you see, I still get mixed up with old people, hoping that even old people will realise that the discoveries of modern science, like the plasticity of the brain, means that old people can in fact continue to think and continue to imagine things. And also, you see, in this country, there's no culture of old people being wise. See? Whereas in other cultures, as you know better than I do, the culture is that the old ones are able to pass on accumulated wisdom. Now we'll have to, if we can get that going again in Australia, that would be very helpful. Now he's going to tell me to stop.
No, I'm not.
Are you going to?
Yeah.
You got more?
Okay. Yeah.
This is boring. This is boring?
No.
I'm sure it's boring.
Okay.
We just want to see if there's any questions
Yeah,
from the audience.
yeah, they're all right. They're all right. You got a question? That's you. No, you waved. It's like an auction. You just bought the house.
Yeah. What do you feel is most important when it comes to helping the homeless?
Oh, I should respect. Respect. I mean, you've got to see respect. The public service can't be both respectful and helpful. Very hard. Very hard. As we were talking in the thing, well, how many did you say if you took on 5 major clients, people with various forms of social handicap or whatever. How many did you say? You'd have to.
I said 5 should be the maximum.
5. So you're going to spend your whole life on that, on the whole working week on 5 people. Now you don't do that with even with your your Centrelink and all that. Look how many people now, if Mr. what's his name gets his way with his budget, you're going to start testing, aren't you? People to see if, in fact, if they qualify for continuation of benefits, isn't it? Well, you need the bloody army.
And now they're doing something at Centrelink, which is, it's supposed to be personal interviews. And what they're doing is, because the government said you need so many hundred done a week, they don't have the staff. So what they're doing is calling people in, and they'll have 50 people in the room, and they'll call that the personal interview. And they talk to them for about 5 or 10 minutes, out, next lot. But that goes on record now in the government files as personal interviews. So they've interviewed these people personally. So they're just cooking the books.
Next. Go on. Done?
No, I'm just checking.
What time are the pictures on?
Looks like you've got a whole page of...
Yeah,
We want to have some afternoon tea too.
yeah,
Oh.
break, yeah, can we, yeah.
Yeah, what? Can I just get you guys to put your hands together for Father Bob?
Thank you.
Everyone's welcome to stay back for some refreshments, and I'm sure Father Bob will stay with us.
No,
for a
he
while.
won't. He'll go home. I've got to go home because I've got to go to work. What's the time? Oh no, I'm going around for 15 minutes. Is that all right?
Actually, there's also something else.
Yes.
Could you please fill in evaluation forms so we
Oh,
can help
evaluation
work
forms.
out about the project.
Oh.
And also, if anyone missed out on a key tag, made by the LB23 sweatshop. They're on the table.
Key tags
And
on the
there's a-
table. Yeah.
And there's tea and refreshments here as well.
Yes. And if we stay in touch by some miracle, well then my foundation will start running volunteer, what do you call it, volunteer training sessions in the near future. But we don't have to run them down where I am. We can always come out here. He's out here in the northern suburbs. So we're hoping to have a campaign in the northern suburbs to try and make contact with people who need help. That's what we're going to try and do. And we won't get in the way of anybody else who's here, like St Vincent de Paul or the Salvos or the Red Crescent or whoever else. Cup of tea? Anyone? Cup of tea? And then you're going to show a picture.
Salam.